Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
May 27, 2020, the lipstick on a pig edition. And we start with that as our lead story, coming to us from telecoms.com. Privacy champion Max Schrems blasts Irish authorities over secret Facebook deal. The deal relates to the Irish Data Protections Commission not dealing with Facebook appropriately but by something called a consent bypass, which was an agreement between the authorities and Facebook to switch its policy from consent to an alleged data use contract, allowing the company to track, target, and conduct research on users. Schrems highly objected to this. This was done not in public, but in private. And Schrems has stated the organization had filed complaints about Facebook and that they fell completely under the spell. The regulators were captured by Facebook, and this result was something that Schrems felt was completely antithetical to GDPR. Next up, from the Financial Times, Andrew Hill on corporate governance ask us to look at what coronavirus tells company boards about the next crisis. He says the pandemic has placed a premium on the busy director and a display of humanity. The busy director is one that actually works and does work as the board, not simply a company competitor or other high-profile individual CEO type who doesn't have any chance to do anything but rubber stamp whatever the company's CEO says. The coronavirus crisis is accelerating a process of deglobalization and digitization that was already underway. As short-term risks diminish, medium and long-term risks look more uncertain. It's going to be a question of what do we do in the next 5 years, but really how the boards have responded during coronavirus will tell you a lot about whether the company is even going to be around in the next crisis. And one thing that's clear is as we lurch now from crisis to crisis and the time frame shortens, boards are going to have to be more active and really do a lot more oversight going forward. Next up, from KYC 360, an ex-Couts banker was on trial for a $700 million transfer from 1MDB to Jho Low. The compliance officer, who has been identified as A, an employee of the bank Couts, was responsible for transferring the money to a holding company owned by, or at least controlled by, Jho Low. And this unusual request of a transfer of $500 million raised eyebrows at the company, yet despite being known as a shell company with a limited track record, 1MDB specified for this to go forward, and the compliance officer approved the transfer. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this trial. Certainly, Jho Low and his crew could not have done many of the things they did without help from such advisors. And our final story is the UK court throws out the Nigerian corruption case against Shell and ENI. Really no surprise there, as the bribe money was paid directly to the government, and the government distributed the bribe money. Unfortunately, that is not illegal under either the UK Bribery Act or the FCPA. Once you make a payment to the government, it's up to the foreign government to decide where it goes. I hope you'll check out this month's 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance program, where I'm focusing on written standards. Also, I hope you will check out the Compliance Live, where we are featuring Ellen Hunt. And finally, I start a 5-part series on compliance programs in the banking industry and beyond, sponsored by K2 Intelligence Fin. Check all those out this week on the Compliance Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.